we had over 100 ticks in that period of time, many of them danger close, and we never lost a single person on the ground. That to me is equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. Timestamp this. How far back from OIF starting are you beginning this process and integrating with, tier one guys and figuring out how to solve this problem?
Yeah, it's probably 10 months total. It was probably,
Yeah.
I think the first live fly was March, April of '02, not long after Anaconda. It was within several weeks of me getting back. And so I think the first live fly was probably April, and then we did another one in the summer. We did another one in the fall. They were about every 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Red flag was great. We built a TST cell, which had world-class humans in it, including a great leader named Craig Franklin. Jason was his call sign, who went on to be a 3-star and was our leader, and a guy named Jeff Bart, who ultimately ended up commanding Red Flag years later. We had sort of early space folks, Jim Griswold. We had UK folks in there, and Woody Pye. I mean, this is the who's who, not Dan Caine, but all these other people were just sort of this awesome group of tacticians and leaders that were all committed to trying to solve this really difficult problem. And we executed the first night of the war, the real first night of the war,
When you talk about 100 ticks, troops in contact, was that specifically focused, obviously, this group that is working the SCUD problem, or is that across the board of the invasion?
No, that was just us out in the West. We were predominantly out in the Western fight. In fact, we were well west of the two prominent lanes. You had the Marines running from south to north, and you had the Army running from south to north, and then west of Lake Tharthar and out in Ambar is predominantly where we were. And so, we had a mixed group of U.S. And coalition allies out there. And between all the forces in theater out west, we had north of 100 ticks that were just solely in that part of the AOR that we were lucky enough to not lose anybody. We did lose some Rangers that we think about a lot up on Haditha Dam. That was the first known use of a chest-worn IED that any of us had ever seen. And I still remember being up there over the dam, and somebody blew themselves up at one of the AOPs. In fact, it was a female bomber that blew herself up. It was just crazy.
I'm going to branch off here because that brings up an interesting point. If we look at what's being waged today, especially when we talk about drone warfare, and then watching the footage, particularly coming out of Ukraine, where, these drones, you see the last moments of someone's life in 1080p. It's changed warfare. Well, back then, IEDs and suicide bombers, again, was a relatively new concept, I think, for us as a fighting force. What were some of the thoughts circling outside of, obviously, the loss of life, but was it wrapping, nugget around of what is happening? Is warfare changing and those thought processes?
For sure. I still remember being in the stack over the dam when I saw the blast up on the dam, and didn't know what had happened because we didn't have any enemy that were like right in contact at that particular moment. And then as the fires net lit up and they were starting to try to CASEVAC what had happened, and hearing the JTAC on the X talking about what had just happened, I remember thinking, wow, this is a really committed enemy, and we need to be changing the way that we think about warfighting and warfare. And if this enemy is that committed, we need to up our game. And I think I have similar thoughts now as we look at mass and simultaneity. with FPVs or autonomy, and our ability as a warfighting nation to pivot at speed to stay ahead of these emerging technologies is going to be really important in the future. And there's a whole bunch of things that we need to do. We need to do better as a joint force and as a Department of Defense along the lines of acquisition reform, so that we can make sure that those young PFCs and E1s and E2s and NCOs have the kit and capability that they need long in advance of something like that.
Yeah, it seems like the game is changing. The drone piece for me, and seeing the footage, when you see like the aerial display, obviously a peaceful display, and the drones are moving obviously en masse, coordinated. You think of like weaponizing one of these systems. I mean, it's already been done, but would be absolutely terrifying. And then how does that change the battlefield? I think drastically.
Yeah, it does. And that's where also I'm encouraged by the nation's entrepreneurial community, right? I mean, there are great young entrepreneurs, both in the service and out of the service, who are thinking about these things and ahead of it. And that's where I think we have an advantage as a nation, is in the power of our forces to think about hard things and come up with solutions. And in particular, man, in the joint soft community, most of the smart people are not the O's, it's the E's, and it's really the NCO cadre. And when I look at combat capability development within the SOCOM enterprise, it's the NCOs who are figuring these things out and bundling things together in new and novel ways to try to create dilemmas and or disruption for these things that we're talking about.